As mentioned, I am David Barrett, the founder and CEO of Expensify. We do expense reports that don't suck. It's a bold vision, but we're improving the world one expense report at a time. This is my only slide, and so that's me, basically. Or actually, that's not me. That's a beautiful woman in the background, but my name is at the bottom. Radical customer acquisition. And so I think that probably everyone in this room is thinking it's like, look, I know how sales works. Sales is all done the same way. It's done the Salesforce way. It's always been done the Salesforce way. And you probably have read the book, Predictable Revenue. If you haven't, your investors almost certainly have. It's basically the Bible. It's like basically all business, all SaaS can only be sold in one way. It's always been sold this one way. And I think the story that I have is that there are actually multiple ways to sell software. And in some of those ways, actually can get pretty radical. And maybe starting off very loosely, I would say it's very hard to disrupt the competition using their sales model. If you want to have a disruptive business, so much of your innovation is actually not applied towards the product, the technology, and things. Yes, those all matter, don't get me wrong. But far more of your innovation be applied to your customer acquisition techniques, because that's actually where the real meat of your business is. And so even if you go back to Salesforce, for example, the Salesforce way wasn't used before Salesforce. It was super radical at the time. In fact, the Salesforce way that we talk about today with BDRs and all sorts of stuff, it wasn't even used by Salesforce when they started. When they started, it was actually all direct acquisition, credit card, no contracts, things like this. And the model itself changed over time. So if Salesforce is going to innovate in their model, we can't just look at their model as the final word. They were replacing something else before it. Because remember, Salesforce, their whole logo is a particularly quaint no software. Which is sounds so hilarious now in the SaaS and cloud world. But the reason that they had no software and server-hosted sort of services was radical at the time. And that radical notion enabled them to operate an entirely different sales model than their competition. Because everyone else out there was selling on-premise. And when you're doing on-premise, you're doing massive, huge contracts. You have field sales. You have all this sort of stuff happening. When Salesforce didn't have that, they didn't need the field sales force. They came out with something entirely new, and that's the model that we all view as the Bible today. But I'm going to say it's possible the Bible is wrong for your business. And I would encourage you to actually reconsider and open up your mind to other possible sales models. And so when I say, the challenge with this is, there's no sort of single recipe for disruption. And so the model that we use probably wouldn't work for you anyway. And so what I'm going to do here after I set this timer, there we go, is I just want to talk a little bit about the path that we took to develop our sales model. And not that you can actually follow our path or that I even encourage you to. It might be completely different. Just to encourage you to try something, just to try something new. And so, because I know that when I started Expensify, so I know the number one reason that anyone gets into expense management is for the chicks, right? I mean, it is just one of the sexiest technologies you can possibly imagine. But after that, I would say, or contrary to popular belief, that's actually not why I got into the business. In fact, it was a complete accident for me to get into this business whatsoever. My background, I've been a programmer since I was 6, computer graphics engines throughout middle school and high school, 3D graphics engines. I worked at a virtual reality lab in college, and then I went to peer-to-peer software and all this sort of stuff, all this hard technology. And so it's not like when I was a kid, I dreamed of being an expense report magnate. It just sort of kind of happened over time. And I would say it happened because we're always open to new and better possibilities. And so when my last startup was acquired, a peer-to-peer content distribution company that was acquired by Akamai, after that I'm like, well, I would do something new, something that solves a problem that I've personally experienced, that I'd pay to have solved, something that can be sold directly to individuals, because I just hated enterprise sales, something that dealt with money. So I figured the best way to make money is to find some way to sell money. It works for the banks, why not me? And so my initial idea actually is a prepaid debit card concept. Imagine a prepaid debit card with no money on it. And every time you use the card, the purchase is routed in real time to a different card. So this very proxy card system. I'm like, oh, that'd be super fun. There's a million applications I could build on top of this thing. Because you could say your card works up to $500 a day. Yours only works $10 per purchase and only at restaurants. Yours only works at Starbucks. It's this very flexible system you could do with it. I went to the banks with this idea, and they're just like, whoa, this is way too weird. That could work, maybe, but 2007, not a good year for the banking sector. Too weird, too risky amount. I'm like, okay, I need to sound low risk. I need to sound boring. I'm like, what is the most boring thing I can possibly imagine? I'm like, aha, expense reports. And so literally that's why I picked expense management, is because it's the dullest thing I could think of, the dullest way to apply this technology they wanted to build that was past the risk departments. And I went back to those banks. I'm like, forget all that. Now I'm just going to do expense reimbursement. And they're like, oh, I mean, that sounds safe and boring, and I hate my expense reports too. And I'm like, and I'm going to do this prepaid debit card thing on the side, but just don't pay attention to that. And they're like, well, sure, what could it possibly be? So that's how I got into it, this space. And so I did no research on expense management, didn't know anything about it, not an accountant, have no interest in the entire space whatsoever. It was just a convenient foil for me to sort of like launch the technology that I wanted. And so in 2008 at TechCrunch 50, we launched Expensify, the corporate card for the masses, where basically you'd give out these prepaid cards to your employees, and then they would be pulled into our super chintzy expense reporting system that we literally did not intend to build. The entire thing was just basically a ruse, a demo that we just wanted to give on stage. It was like, and so we're just making shit up. It was like, oh yeah, you know, that iPhone that just launched, yeah, we're going to use its camera with a mobile app, and we're going to take pictures of receipts and read all the information off the receipts, and then we're going to, like, I don't know, submit it automatically to your accountant, I guess, and then we're going to reimburse you the next day. It's going to be amazing. And we had none of that existed. We had no plans of building any of it. We just needed something that sounded really good on stage, just that we can kind of launch this technology and then drop it and do something else. The very next day, MasterCard shut us down, canceled all of our cards. And I'm just like, fuck, now what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, people seem to really like this expense reporting concept. Because actually, when I launched this product, everyone's like, yeah, your cards are really interesting. They're cool and all that, but your expense reports sound amazing. And I'm like, what, really? They're like, oh, yeah, man. I mean, I spend so much time in expense reports. Like, it takes away hours every weekend with my kids because I'm on the road and I do my expense reports on my own time. And I just heard stories again and again about like, the human cost of expense management because it's such a terrible space. It's basically like, you are extending a zero-interest loan to your employer, and then your own repo man to get paid back. It's like the most humiliating thing because you're like a high-paid business person scraping together like $1 coffee receipts and things like this. It's bullshit. The entire thing is just awful. And so as a result, we realized there's like so much angst and anxiety coming from our users. And our system that we built, this sort of like chintzy demo system, the way it worked was every time you signed up, about a half hour later, you get an email from me. And the email just said, hi, thanks for signing up for Expensify. I'm David. I'd love to hear, you know, what do you do? What do you want to do? And how can I help? So thanks. It's very open-ended, basically contrary to all of the best guides of how you should run a survey. There's no clear call to action. There's no link to click. There's no survey questions. It's just totally open-ended. And so a good survey, if you're lucky, will get like maybe a 5% response rate. Like that's pretty good. This got a 12% response rate. And 12%, and the answers were basically pages and pages. These huge diatribes of like, I fucking hate expense reports so much. This is why I hate it. This is the way it should be. This is everything about it. There's just so much raw anger and anxiety and sort of like malice coming out of this entire problem domain. And I realized, wow, there's so much enthusiasm and emotion around this space. But none of it was from decision makers. Like the people who actually, the accountants, the people who are actually doing the expense reports, they're like, yeah, they kind of suck, but it's also my job. And so it's just like, whatever. It's not that big a deal. The people who are salespeople are like, this isn't my job. Expense management is not the thing that I signed up to do. I don't care about any of this. It's just a burden to me. It's actually making me make less money because it's affecting my commission checks. And so we realized that when we came to our space, a space that's been around since like, you know, the dawn of time. It's, you know, maybe the world's second oldest business model because like every single business has expenses. Not all businesses have revenue, but all of them have expenses. And so as a result, someone is doing something to keep track of your expenses in every single business in the world since the dawn of time. It doesn't matter what company size. It doesn't matter what region you are, industry, nothing. Everyone in your company does expenses some of the times. It's a truly universal problem. But I would say the problem has always been approached with a very classic sort of top-down enterprise sales model. And enterprise sales is very, very different because when you sort of adopt the classic enterprise sales model, everything about your business is defined. And if you say like, and specifically I would say if you have a commissioned sales team, the rest of your business simply just doesn't matter. It all just cascades from that. Because if you have a commissioned sales team, that means the people on the front line are always talking to companies just slightly higher than the companies you can currently handle. Because everyone wants the biggest check they can possibly get, so they're always going for the biggest customer. But that means that all your conversations are with people who do not like your software. Because if you're going to people who you're actually good for, they'd be going for their smallest leads. No, they're always going for your biggest leads. And so that means that actually your team is always out there, and because they're knocking on other people's doors, they're talking to people who aren't really experiencing the problem most of the time. Because it's like, you're knocking the CFO's door, and it's like, yeah, maybe I'll buy your software if you build me a helicopter pad. Like something ridiculous. And so that's why enterprise sales models are always like, the salesperson's like, yeah, sure, helicopter pad, done, no problem. My commission check's going to be huge on that. It's going to be awesome. Even though then that sort of goes on to this thick product management organization, which you need because when you have a commission sales team, everyone out there is fighting over engineering resources to the death. It's not a collaborative effort whatsoever. It has nothing to do with what's good for the product. Everything is driven ultimately by what's going to give me the biggest commission check, and they will sell anything they can get away with. And so the product management team has scheduled the engineering team out for like the next 30 years for all these like series of releases because everything's baked into contracts and things. And then the salespeople are all like hanging out with the engineers like, so how's it going? How's your weekend? Yeah, about that. Anyway, that helicopter pad, how's that coming along? Because I got this pool that I really want to put in, and that helicopter pad is going to pay for it. And then eventually the engineers are like, what? They have no helicopters. That doesn't make any sense. Why are we building this? And it's like, doesn't matter, man. People way outside of your pay grade have already signed off on this. And so I'd say an enterprise sales team drives so much of your business because not only does it determine who your customers are going or who you're going after, always people who don't like your product, it determines basically your entire engineering roadmap as well. Because the personal relationship between the salesperson and the engineer trumps whatever might actually be best for the business overall. And so I'd say that's the industry that we came into, and that's why expense reports suck. That's why they're so awful. It's because when you're doing an enterprise sales model, you are building a product designed to be sold to a decision maker who probably will never ever use your product. Whereas if you have an enterprise or even sort of a user-driven bottom-up adoption model, you're building a product designed to be used by the end user. And that's radically different in every possible way. And so when we came in to disrupt our space, and maybe just give a sense. So it's like we've been around for about 8 years. We have about 25,000 companies, full companies adopted Expensify company-wide. This ranges everything from Fortune 500 companies down to individuals. And so like Uber, Yahoo, Evernote, like Atlassian, Zendesk, all of the unicorns, all the former unicorns, things like this. Like that's our bread and butter. And then, of course, tons of companies underneath them as well. And we got all of these without any advertising, without any outbound calling whatsoever, and no commission salespeople. And this is because when you build a model that is about engaging the users outnumber the decision maker 100 to 1. And so as a result, if you actually can get the users on your side, it makes the deal so much easier. Like let me give an example when we closed Yahoo. So Yahoo came to us actually with to adopt Expensify. And they're like, hey, we're doing an RFP process for expense management. We're looking at the whole industry. Here's our RFP of all these requirements. And we're just like, nah, we're just not going to do that. And then they're like, oh, OK. And then they came back to us like, well, actually, these are the ones that we really care about. And we're like, well, actually, those are kind of reasonable. And we're already doing those. It's like, OK, we'll keep talking. And then this whole process, we just kept like walking away from it. And then, but they kept coming back. And we're like, why do they care so much? Like, why do they care so much about Expensify? Then we thought more about it. We realized Yahoo was a major source of churn for us for years because they kept acquiring our customers, like Tumblr and things like this. Again and again, every time they did that, they would take a few hundred more people off of Expensify and put it onto Oracle iExpense, basically like the bane of our existence. And so in doing that, however, they seeded the seeds of destruction for Oracle iExpense because everyone hated it so much. And when Marissa came into Yahoo with the goal of I'm going to attract and retain the best employees, what are the top concerns that people have? Like what are the top nuisances and distractions people have at Yahoo? Number one on that list was expense management. Like how crazy is that? But also from her perspective, she's like, wow, this is actually something I can do something about pretty easy. Like that's actually a nice thing to have at the top of your list. But the thing is, they weren't saying replace Oracle iExpense. They were saying adopt Expensify. And that's why the deal from the very start was we had it. It was ours to lose because they realized it doesn't matter what else they adopt. If it's not Expensify, that concern remains. It's actually pointless to do anything but adopt us because that's what the employees are clamoring for. And so our entire business model is about figuring out how to get in front of the users and then rile them up and then for them to surround their finance teams with pitchforks and torches to demand us by name. And that's how all of our business comes from. Every one of our customers has come through some model of this. Basically, the first person in the company, it's almost never the decision maker. It's almost always one of the employees who hears about us, because we do any advertising. So the only way you can learn about us is if you know someone who hates expense reports and uses us, or if you happen to be searching for expense reports in the App Store. That's pretty much it. But as a result, the only way you learn about us is actually through the employee pain process. And so we start off basically with the janitor, and then we turn the janitor into an enterprise deal. And that's our entire business model. We didn't come up with this. This wasn't a very obvious model. From the very start, going back to those days when we were just kind of like figuring out like what the hell we're going to do, we're like, what is expense management as a space? Everyone's like, oh, that's cool. That you're pivoted. You did your pivot. So now it's really clear you're going to do expense management. That's cool. It's a good space, And so yeah, I guess you're just going to hire some sort of enterprise VP of sales from Oracle. Is that your plan? Like everyone kept asking this. Every investor that we would talk to, every partner or advisor, it's like, dude, sales is solved. Just look at Salesforce. This is how they do it. Look, literally read this book. It'll tell you how to do it. Why would you do anything different than that? And basically it's like, I don't know, man, because the people signing up for my product are actually individual employees. And they're like, individual employees, that's useless. What do you can do with that? And initially we thought the same thing. But then we realized that every time you submit an expense report, you put us in touch with someone more important than you. Basically, every expense report to us is a viral lead generation to a more qualified lead. But when the endorsement is coming from an employee, it is so much better than us calling them, not just because they trust that endorsement more, but because it doesn't take any of our time. And so furthermore, as we realized we got into this model, because it's enterprise sales, and enterprise sales means that the company pays for it, not the employee, our Expensify mobile app is free. It doesn't cost anything. It's truly a free app. There's no way to actually buy it. Or actually, we just changed that. Now you can buy it. But you can only buy it as a decision maker. There's no way for an individual employee to sort of like buy Expensify. And as a result, it doesn't cost anything when the user installs the app. It doesn't cost anything to acquire an individual employee. We sort of stumbled into this model that has zero marginal cost user acquisition combined with sort of this viral upsell model into the enterprise. Now, by itself, that wouldn't be enough. But at the same time, like Dropbox and others, were like, actually, I really champion probably Apple for this notion, kind of the consumerization of IT. Like when my last startup got acquired by Akamai, and we all had Macs, and we came into the Akamai, and it was a Windows shop. And they're like, oh yeah, hey, welcome, congratulations on the acquisition. Here's your Dell. That laptop that you have is cute, but if you plug it into the IT network, you're going to get fired. And you'd be like, oh, what just happened? You just plugged in my computer? You're not going to fucking fire me. You just acquired my company. Of course I can bring whatever laptop I want into my company. And I think but that was such a radical idea that actually an employee could just give the finger to the IT team. You couldn't do that 10 years ago. You couldn't do that 20 years ago, but you can now. And the same thing with like phones. Initially, it's like, hey, here's your BlackBerry. That's all you're going to use. And it's like, nah, I'm going to use my phone. It's cool. Or Dropbox. It's like, the idea that the company is going to choose some sort of like storage system for you, like, no, of course you just bring that yourself. All your best tools you bring yourself. Trello, things like this, you just bring it in. It's become a whole new world. And we take it for granted now, kind of. But when we first started, it was super new. And none of the experts at the time thought that this could possibly happen. They're like, David, you're such an idiot. Obviously, the employees are not going to start submitting expense reports using a system that's not endorsed by the company. Are you kidding me? And again, we were told in no uncertain terms that our business model couldn't possibly work, with the single glaring exception that it was working incredibly well. But no one could explain why. And actually, it's really frustrating because we'd go to like VC pitches or something like this, and they're like, "Hey, here's our numbers. Here's everything's going up like this." I'm like, "Oh, cool. That sounds really great. What's your CAC?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, our customer acquisition cost, it's not zero. It's just that we don't pay anything." They're like, "Okay, so what?" Like, yeah, like the most important metric that any investor ever thinks of is like the CAC and LTV ratio. And I'm like, "Yeah, our CAC is undefined because we don't actually do any paid acquisition. And lifetime value, well, that one gets hard too because for us with this model, because it's activity-based pricing, it's in the organization, and it's this very gradual process, everyone just pays us more. And so every past cohort we've ever acquired pays us more today than they ever have. It's negative revenue churn. Now it's all in vogue. But at the time, everyone's like, what? It's like, okay, so your CAC is 0. Your LTV is, I guess, infinity. And so the ROI on your non-existent ad spend is 0 over infinity. Like, what the hell does that even mean? And so as a result, it was just really complicated. Just like screwed everything up. And so investors are like, yeah, I can see that things are taking off, but I just don't understand why, and I can't get behind that. And so it's actually a challenge when you're actually disrupting a sales model. In fact, when you're disrupting everything, is that no one understands it. You can't disrupt something doing it the way that everyone else has done it before. But when you get into a world where actually you're doing something in a genuinely new way, people freak out. They're like, what is going on? How is this going to keep working year after year? You can't give me any confidence into this. And so I'd say, as a disruptor, you should recognize that you're going to receive extreme pushback from everyone around you. Basically, every expert in the industry can only be an expert in what worked in the past. No one's an expert about what can work in the future. And if you want to be that expert, you should expect everyone around you to constantly tell you how wrong you are. But those people just simply don't matter. And so I'd say focus on actually understanding what's working for you in practice, and only do that. And don't actually pay attention to everyone else. And I'd say the biggest risk is when you're talking to investors. Because investors will drive you towards a model that works. Again, they're not looking to disrupt expense reports, they're looking for a return. Or if you're a venture capitalist, let's say most investors actually aren't even really looking for a return for their clients. They're looking for their cut of every round. Because you know how VCs make money, most of them at least. I mean, there's this great Harvard Business Review article that talks about this. VCs make money when you close the round. And that's it. And so it actually doesn't matter how you spend that money, if you spend that money, anything about that. It only matters if you take the money. That's how they make their money. And so it should be no surprise that the vast majority of VCs, through sheer coincidence, their advice always somehow ends up with, and therefore, you should raise a shitload of money. Valuation doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. It only matters, do you raise the money? Because they take a cut of it. Now, you might say, it's like, oh, but there's the carry check. Don't they make a bunch of money when the company exits? Think about that for a second. So it's like you're a new VC. You start off. You're closing like $1 million deal. You get your cut of that. It's like, cool, I get this good check today. It's money in the bank right now. And maybe in 10 years, this company might succeed. And then I will get a cut of their outcome. That's cool, but I also know that 95% of businesses fail outright and never generate a return for anyone. So it's like, what do you think they're more motivated by? The money they're going to get right now when they close the round, or the money they might get in a decade when you exit? And then even think about that time when you do exit. So it's like, okay, fast forward 10 years. You're a successful VC. You've been closing giant rounds. And so now you're getting these huge checks. You just like closed this $100 million round for this company. You made a ton of money off of this. And then it's like, oh yeah, that company you invested a decade ago, it exited. Cool. Here's your tiny check for that. It's like, who cares? It just doesn't matter at that point. You've already made so much money up to that point before your first company could possibly exit. The exit valuation is just not meaningful. And so I would say the challenge when talking with your trusted advisors is that they're not necessarily unbiased. And in general, they're going to bias you to the options that are the easiest to sell to their LPs. And if you're doing a radical and disruptive model, it's not that. And imagine the investors in Expensify. They go back to their guys. They're like, yeah, so they don't have any CAC or LTV, and I guess everything's infinite or something. It's really complicated. I don't know, man, but it just seems good. Like, that's the pitch that they would give internally. It's like, that's a hard pitch to give. That's why we were very selective of our investors. We found people who believed in the idea of disruption, but most don't. Most investors don't really care about disruption. They care about closing that giant round and such that they could get their big check and move on to the next deal. And that invariably means that they have to find ways to spend a ton of money super fast. One way you can spend money super fast, hire a gigantic sales team. And so is it a surprise that they're always pushing you to hire a gigantic sales team right now, we got to grow ahead of the curve. We have to invest in growth and blah, 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 all sort of stuff. All of it adds up to we need to raise and spend a whole bunch of money right now and spend it so fast that there's no possible way that we can get profitable. Because if you're profitable, that means there's a chance you might not raise again. But so long as you're not profitable, you're always in the pocket of the next investor, which, because of their privileges, means that they're always going to participate in that round too. So it's just basically, they're just going to milk you for cash until you either exit, maybe, or you go down. Doesn't really matter either way, because they make their money either way. It's a genius business model, don't get me wrong, but it's not your business model. And your business model is probably or it's certainly much more nuanced than they could possibly understand. Or it should be more nuanced if you're applying the appropriate level of creativity to disrupt your particular or your particular space. So I'd say the key to disruption is doing things differently. Doing things differently means that you're not going to have a lot of friends from the people who profit from doing things the same way, even if that same way fails the vast majority of the time, which it does. Like the best practices for running a startup still fail 9 times out of 10. And so don't follow the best practices, follow your instincts. That's pretty much all I have to say. And so I'm wondering if anyone has any questions whatsoever.
Questions? All right.
It seems like the unique nature of expenses being such a pain point makes your model sort of unique to that particular pain. I mean, are there other forms of pain that would enable a model like yours?
Well, sure. So tell me about your business real quick. Like, what do you do, and what's your product? Can we hit the microphone back?
I'm a little unique. I'm not in the SaaS business. I'm a self-employed consultant, but so I've used your product. It's great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I would say that's why, yes, expense management is unique, but like every business is a unique snowflake. And I think the key is to recognize that things are unique. Even if you are doing the exact same business as a competitor, but you started a couple years later, like that makes you different. That means you're born in a different time. Your initial customers, your cohorts are slightly different. The world has changed around you. And so there's no such thing as two identical businesses. Everything is always different. So you are always being dealt a unique hand. The question is if you're going to play it a unique way, or if you're just going to throw away the cards that seem kind of weird and go with the cards that you recognize. Like the way you disrupt is by finding something that someone else didn't do. Now, the problem with, I would say, good ideas is that good ideas always sound like bad ideas. Because if a good idea just sounded like a good idea, it wouldn't be a good idea. It'd just be the thing that everyone does. It'd just be like common sense at that point. The best ideas are those that everyone says, that's stupid. Because the best ideas are the things that there has to be some reason people haven't done it yet. And it has to be like this huge visceral reaction. In fact, the better the idea, the worse it must sound. Although it couldn't possibly be any other way. The problem is most ideas that sound bad truly are bad. And so you have to sift through that. As an entrepreneur, your job is like dumpster diving. It's basically like going into this thing, you come out, and no matter how great a find you have, it always smells bad. Because there's something about it that kept everyone else away. And so I think no one knows what that could be, and you don't know it either. But at least be smart enough to recognize the lack of your knowledge and go into it with open eyes and to keep searching until you find that great thing. And just be prepared that whenever you find it, everyone else is going to think it's stupid. And also, it probably is. Any other questions?
So even though we can't take this model and apply it to each of our businesses universally, it's going to be different every time. There is the tried and true theory of disruptors, like 5% of people in an organization will be disruptors, and they're going to drive like 90% of the change. And so disruptors are our internal advocates, the people going to bat, the people who are willing to die on this hill to get this solution that they love implemented. And so as we're, throughout history, we can say, these 5% are going to be the ones that drive the 90% of the change. But as we progress, like in your example, more and more people are giving the finger to the IT team and doing it their own way. Maybe that is growing from 5% to 10%. So in your mind, attracting these disruptors, appealing to these disruptors, would you say the focus should be mostly on getting those 5% to be really happy and equipping them with the tools they need to advocate? Or would it be giving another 10% who aren't genetically predisposed to be that disruptor type person? Would you say there's also an effort, we should make an effort to enable those 10 to 20% of people who are disgruntled but maybe wouldn't speak up, but maybe if you gave them a piece of content or trying to convince them to become the disruptor? Or can we rely on that 5%?
Well, that's a great question, and there's no clear answer there. And I think that there's sort of this axis between do you want to be Apple or do you want to be Microsoft? Both very successful businesses, but just very different businesses. And basically, do you want to be a business for everyone, or do you want to be business for a very small set of the market that's willing to pay an enormous premium for a quality product? And I would say you can't have it both ways. And so I'd say Expensify, we've chosen like farther on the Apple scale of things. Like we're a premium product. We cost more than the competition. We're much better, and we don't discount. And so it's like, as a result, if you come to us and it's like, hey, you're really cool, but you know, I need to have a 50% discount. I'm like, you must not think we're that cool because you're asking for a discount. If you thought we were super cool, you wouldn't care. And so I'd say that the best customers, they're price insensitive. It's like, we cost like $9 a month. And that's and it's activity-based pricing, meaning that we only charge the people who are active in a given month. About a third of your company is active in a given month. So that means we cost roughly $3 per employee per month. It's like a Big Mac. And so it's like, am I cooler than a Big Mac? Do you ask McDonald's for a 50% discount? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I think that if you want to go to a premium product, I think it's about orienting your entire business around the premium nature of your product. And that means focusing more on the people who appreciate what you are and understand it and get it, as opposed to the people who need to be like sort of dragged along. Like in our world, for example, there's this big divide between, like I saw Xero is in the back here. So like Xero is a cloud-first accounting package. And there's like QuickBooks, which is like a desktop accounting package. And there's QuickBooks Online in there as well. And we see that like Xero customers are so great because they just get it. They just get the whole thing. They're like, oh, the web is cool. The internet is secure. I have a mobile app, maybe. Things like this. Whereas people who are coming off of a QuickBooks desktop, they're like, yeah, this internet thing creeps me out. I got to keep my data secure under my mattress. And it's like, that makes no sense. Like, there's so many conversations I need to have with you before you can even understand what I'm trying to sell you. It's tough, man. And so I'd say it's a real challenge. Now, but at the same time, I don't want to advocate that you should just like disregard everyone that's perfect. Like we have thousands and thousands of customers on QuickBooks Desktop, and we have a whole team that stand by to help them out. So even if it's not like high-grade premium fuel, and maybe it's like tar sands are still valuable. They just have to work harder for them. And so I'd say it's about have this process to identify who the best people are and leverage that to the maximum effect, and then find the pockets of people who might not be as amazing, but are still good. And then it's up to you to drive that line, but that line is tough. And everyone, your investors, in fact, employees, most people tend back to, it's like entropy, just tend back to the baseline. And like left to their own devices, everyone just kind of just becomes boring. There's like, yeah, we could do that, or we could just do the easy way that everyone else does. I'm gonna do the easy way. And I think that happens for your organization, for everyone around you. And so it requires, as a leader of your organization, a constant reminder that it's like, no, guys, it is okay to fire a customer. Like, that customer is not worth our time. And instead, in that same amount of time, we can close 5 more customers. But if we focus on the right one. Even from a branding perspective, for example. Like, when we started Expensify, our tagline was Expensify, well, it's corporate card for the masses until that got shut down. And then we're like, oh, OK, no, it's really about employees and Expense Reports. We're like, well, what should our tagline be? We're like, is it Expense Reports that make you happy? We're like, oh, man, that just sounds super lame, and that's such a high bar. And it's like, that's not proud. It's like, well, modern expense reports, automated expense reports, whatever that is. And eventually we're like, no, it's just expense reports that don't suck. Because like that's good enough, man. That's the real problem. But the real problem is it just sucks so bad for the end user. Again, everyone at the time is like, you're an idiot. That could never possibly work. Ignoring, of course, that everyone loves Salesforce. Salesforce model is no software, so it is a negative slogan. And I was like, negative slogans never work, except for the most successful companies out there. And so I'd say arranging your branding to appeal to actually your champions, as opposed, even though it might even turn off your decision makers. Like, we actually have, like, churches are a major customer base for us because of a ton of money, very complicated tax status, and reimbursements go to churchgoers, not employees. And so they're like, yeah, I really want to use your product, but this whole don't suck thing is really, my church is not super excited about that. We're like, yeah, so do we got a deal? And they're like, yeah. But I would say that the key thing is just staying focused on what makes you unique and keep a spotlight on the people who care about that being unique. If you want to have a premium product. If you want to go the Microsoft route, that's cool too. That's probably a different model I don't know much about.
I got a question for you, actually. So at the beginning, you mentioned, speaking of the church thing, keyed me off. So at the beginning, you mentioned you have all these really big unicorns, tech companies in the Valley. One big question that we're all trying to wrap our heads around is breaking through into the mainstream. We're all selling to early adopters. Now, your bottom-up approach is good with the early adopter crowd. Do you have any success breaking through to more mainstream customers, and how did you do that?
Good question. So basically, how do we use disruptive acquisition models on Main Street. And I would say certainly San Francisco or Silicon Valley is our sort of like, that's our home turf, that's our strongest. But we've got customers all over the world. Like we have offices in San Francisco, Michigan, just opened in Portland, and I just moved there, amazing town. Melbourne, London, and so we've got customers all over the world. And so that means all over the world is not Silicon Valley. And we have customers all throughout the United States as well. And I'd say, to the point earlier, every business has someone in there agitating for change. Like that's everyone, there are champions everywhere. They kind of bubble up from the ground equally everywhere. You just have to find some way to identify them. And I guess I would say Silicon Valley is more receptive to change, perhaps. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the world isn't either. And so I don't know, I guess I push back a little bit on the challenge of breaking through to the mainstream. Or maybe I'd approach it differently. I would say you have to have a lead generation model that can actually reach all parts of the market. In our particular case, it's the like mobile app stores. Like 80% of our users only use the mobile app. And so as a result, and like a huge fraction, I don't know the exact number of our signups come through the mobile app. And the mobile app store works everywhere. Everyone has a phone anymore. And so I would say we found a way, a zero marginal cost user acquisition vehicle that is location independent. And so we go anywhere iPhone and Android go, which is pretty much anywhere these days. If it weren't for that, if I didn't have a mobile acquisition effort, that would be much more difficult. So I think, again, this comes down to being creative about how you acquire leads. And there are champions everywhere, but just because they exist doesn't matter if you can't reach them. And so the way you reach them is through creativity. And there are no clear answers to that.
All right, another question?
What's going on back there?
Howdy. You talked a lot about closing deals, but you also talked a lot about not having a traditional sales team. So who is the person who's closing the deals, and how do they do it?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so yeah, we don't have a traditional sales team, but we do have people that help with it. In fact, I would say about half of all of our customers actually buy the product before they've spoken to anybody whatsoever. Not a chat, not anything. We don't have a phone line, for example. But the vast majority of our customers, regardless of whether they talk to us before or after buying, eventually talk to us. And because we're an activity-based sales model, we only make money if you get active. And you can only get active if you actually like and understand and deploy the product. And so for us, our primary revenue generator is not our sales team, it's our support team. Now, for the vast majority of companies, support is just like a cost. It's just basically like a thing that you have to do that you hate. And so as a result, you sort of like skimp out on it as much as possible. In our particular case, however, our support team is our primary revenue generator. And so we have an incredibly highly trained sort of organization. We call it customer success to reflect that it's not just about answering a question, it's about answering what you should be asking as well. Looking at your account and going the extra mile and so forth, because we know that if you're having a problem, it's probably not just one problem, it's probably multiple problems. Let's take care of all of them, every interaction we have. So I'd say first, we've got a ton of self-service. We invest a tremendous amount in self-service, and that gets people really far. Then we invest a ton in basically having very scalable customer success, which is super difficult, especially in our space because expense management is so complicated. Like we are connected to every single service system you're back in, whether it's your accounting system, your payroll, your CRM, your HR system. We're probably more connected to every system in ERP than any other service out there. And so that means that our guys have to be experts in Workday and Zenefits and also understand like vendor bills versus in NetSuite versus Intact. All of our guys can they're like, oh yeah, I know all these answers, no problem. But that takes a long time to scale that team up. Third, I would say we have what we call our launch team. Our launch team is reserved for sort of, you can't ask for it, but rather we'll qualify you through our support team and other tools. And if we see it's like, oh, okay, you're pretty good, we're going to offer to reach out to you. We'll get you on a call to walk through the process. We'll invite you to a webinar so you can see a demo. And then we will offer to do a one 15-minute setup call with you. And that setup call basically it's like before you have the call, it's like make sure you can sign into your accounting package, make sure you already know all this information, demonstrate via email as you already have all this information because I don't want to waste anyone's time. And then when we hop in that call with you, it's just very fast implementation. And at the very end of the call, we take a billing card. And then finally, we do have a sales team that basically is reserved for more strategic selling. A big name comes along, marquee name, something like this. We will put you through a CRM and the whole process there. But the key thing is, and what I would say, the reason I say we don't have a classic enterprise sales team is no one is on a commission. and that everyone recognizes, even our salespeople, when they're closing out like Yahoo and the other companies, they recognize the money from this customer actually doesn't matter that much. That's not the primary value for this deal. That we're not giving the white glove treatment because actually their revenue is significant to our bottom line, but because they create the halo effect that brings everyone else there. And so it's like, let's get the deal, but the important thing is not the money. The important thing is getting the deal. And so it's a very different environment than a commission organization. So yes, we definitely use people, but they're being used in very different ways than most.
I think we're going to have to stop there. David, wow, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.